Welcome, everyone, to the Over Under Movies podcast, where we take a prominent figure or franchise in the world of filmmaking and ask the simple question, are they overrated or are they underrated? My name is DeAngelis, and on today's show, I am joined, as always, by my co-host, Jason Gong, as well as our first ever guest on the podcast, Ryan Clarkson. Welcome to the pod, Ryan.
Cheers. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So we got a three-person panel today. Really excited. On today's podcast, we are talking about the director of the movie of the summer, Oppenheimer. That is British-American filmmaker Christopher Nolan. Before we get into the meat of this episode, we first want to remind everyone that this podcast exists in both audio and video formats, so feel free to check out all of our full episodes on our YouTube page, as well as TikTok, Instagram, or wherever else you get your daily dose of dopamine for short-form content. If you're interested in supporting the show, we do have a Patreon page where we have perks ranging from getting your name at the end credits of every podcast, all the way up to early episode access and even being a co-host on this very episode. That link, along with links to all of our socials, including our Overrated Club Discord server, can be found in the description of this episode. Gentlemen, Christopher Nolan, heck of a director, huh?
Listen, I'm going to be saying some wild stuff, I'm sure, but I would love to start immediately by saying yes, Christopher Nolan is an absolutely outstanding filmmaker.
So the first thing we need to talk about before we get into whether he's overrated or underrated is we need to figure out how is the general public rating him. This man has, 12 movies he's directed features for? Just going down the list, he started his filmmaking career in 1998 with an indie darling film called Following. Ryan, have you seen Following?
I actually have not. I wanted to, but I just couldn't. Couldn't get to it.
Couldn't cram it in there. We saw Following a couple days ago. It's a film about a man who follows people on the street. It was made for $6,000. It made like $40,000 at the box office, something like that. So
huge return.
Yeah, huge return. A lot of guerrilla style filmmaking. You could tell like he's just shooting on the sidewalk or like some diner that he asked like, "Hey, can I shoot in here for a few minutes?"
I honestly love those types of movies. Those like low budget first features.
And then he went right from that into a film called Memento, which is his first movie that kind of like put him on the map a bit. Stars Guy Pearce, Carrie-Anne Moss, Joey Pants, coming straight off of The Matrix, those two.
Yeah.
Memento is, I just saw it for the first time a couple weeks ago. Interesting little movie. It's the first one where you can really start to see that non-linear storytelling that he puts into tons of his movies.
Yeah.
He goes from that into Insomnia, which stars amazingly Robin Williams and oh my god, I'm blanking. Al Pacino stars Al Pacino and Robin Williams in a murder mystery in Alaska, and then he goes from those like fun little like small films and then right into Batman Begins.
Yep.
2005. This is the movie that puts him on the map. And then from there, he's got, I'm just going to rattle off the list here. The Prestige in 2006, Dark Knight in 2008, which is obviously his big movie. We'll be talking Dark Knight a lot in this podcast. Inception in 2010, Dark Knight Rises in 2012, Interstellar 2014, Dunkirk in 2017, Tenet in 2020, and then, of course, the movie of the summer, Oppenheimer in 2023. Ryan, I guess I'll throw it to you first. Like, what is the first thing you think about when you think a Christopher Nolan film?
Well, the first thing I think about when I think Christopher Nolan is all about his visual style, his like lack of VFX, like his commitment to like real stunt work and like just big bombastic action set pieces, things like that. That like I feel like maybe not in his early films, but they really define like his like career run there from like the Batman movies all the way to Tenet. And like I feel like with every movie he's gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. Up until Oppenheimer, where I feel like he kind of dialed it back a little, which I think Oppenheimer might be one of my favorites of Nolan.
Yeah, the first thing I think of when I think about Nolan, I don't know if this is the first thing I thought of until I started rewatching his movies for this podcast, but it's got to be the non-linear storytelling that he does for like probably half these movies or more. Even in Following, the story is told all out of order, and it's hard to follow. Yes, thank you.
Coincidentally.
But he just loves it. He loves not telling a story in order.
Yeah, that's what's interesting about him is that his movies are such a wide range of topics and genres. Like he's got a war movie, he's got a movie about going into people's dreams, he's got a space epic science fiction movie, he's got a trilogy of superhero movies. But even through all of this like wide range of topics, his movies are all kind of similar.
Yeah.
The guy has a style that he likes. He has like an opening sequence that is either like a flashback or a flash forward or something like that that gives you like a sense of like mystery for the rest of the film. And yeah, he just loves nonlinear storytelling. He loves jumping around. Memento is such a weird movie to watch. If you're drawing like a timeline of the way that Memento is like structured, you basically are like constantly like rewinding through the story.
Yeah.
The beginning of the movie is the end of the story, and then you basically go one scene back as the movie is progressing. It's such a strange way to structure a movie, and it's his first like legit big Hollywood movie that he does. He's got real actors in the movie, and he is just fucking going for it right out of the gate. It's absurd.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely interesting. There's no doubt about it. The style he chose, especially for that particular movie, is like it's eye catching. It grabs your attention, and it brings people like into it. You know, because like it's hard to watch that movie passively. Like you have to be involved in that movie. Like you have to be thinking about every scene, and it really gets you involved, which I think is like the ultimate like reason why that movie stood the test of time.
Yeah, and what's interesting about him is that you see his first couple films, Memento and Insomnia, and they're kind of more personal stories, and they're not big action films or anything like that. Nothing that would lead you to think that this is the guy that we should give Batman to. I mean, in 2005, the Batman franchise was kind of a joke when it comes to like live action films. Was the last one Batman and Robin that came out?
The Joel Schumacher.
Was it really?
Yeah, so that was the stretch that we had no Batman movies. You know, arguably the biggest superhero on the planet.
What was that?
We're gonna hand the keys to the guy that did Memento and Insomnia.
From Batman and Robin to freaking Dark Knight.
Well, they needed to go fully the other direction, I think, because like Batman and Robin did not land with people.
And that's the funny thing is that we recently talked about James Gunn and kind of similar trajectory. He does Slither and Super, which are both, you know, kind of like lighthearted movies. And then he goes into Guardians of the Galaxy, which you can see is very similar to his early work. However, Christopher Nolan, Batman Begins is very different than his other movies.
Well, I guess it's a linear story, so that's different right off the bat.
Yeah, there is some flashback stuff going on.
God damn, he can't help himself.
Yeah, it's nowhere near what he does in his other movies, but it's borderline boring linearly.
Yeah, I mean, Batman Begins, I think, is like such a great superhero origin movie. I think it kind of fits like almost an MCU mold, so I do think it doesn't have all the trappings of a Nolan film, but by the time you get to Dark Knight, it's very much just like pure Nolan.
Well, we can get into Dark Knight right now if you want. Is this the best superhero movie ever made? Because that's the realm that like it gets talked about in.
It's not my favorite, but it's a lot of people's favorite.
What's your favorite?
I don't know, probably, I think, so this is kind of a hot take, but I think my favorite is Winter Soldier. I really like that movie. I really like Captain America Winter Soldier.
All right, then. I like Winter Soldier. It's not the Dark Knight, I'll tell you that.
Or maybe Into the Spider-Verse. I really like Into the Spider-Verse.
Spider-Verse is pretty good. I would probably say Dark Knight's the best. I wouldn't say objectively, because you can't really say anything objectively, but it's in my top 10 movies of all time, I think. And it's going to be hard arguing that he's overrated, knowing that one of his movies is one in my top 10, but The Dark Knight it's just a different animal completely.
Yeah, and it's wild because he's coming right off of The Prestige, which he does between Batman Begins and The Dark Knight. I recently saw The Prestige for the first time. What a weird concept for a movie. It's a contemporary film about feuding magicians.
It's so good. That's probably my favorite, or it was my favorite Nolan movie until I saw Oppenheimer.
And so Christopher Nolan and Christian Bale, I mean, they spend a solid like 6 years together, like making movies. I guess we have to talk about the actors that he has in his films. It's just the list is like endless of just absolute star power that he gets for his movies. It's kind of become like a thing he's known for now. You look at Oppenheimer.
Oh yeah.
Oppenheimer, every scene, it's just like a random dude shows up. It's like, wait, why is Rami Malek in this movie and not talking? He's like a background extra.
He's literally just like a punching bag for everybody else until
Yeah.
the last scene he's in.
It's crazy. He has become a director where actors are like, I don't give a shit. I mean, Florence Pugh like literally said this, like, I don't give a shit. I'll do literally anything in this movie. Just tell me what I'm doing.
Did you see what Matt Damon said about his Oppenheimer appearance? Where he was like, he told his wife, like, I'm not doing any more acting for the next like 5 or 6 years unless Christopher Nolan calls me. And then Christopher Nolan called him and he was like, yep, I'm doing it, whatever you need.
Yeah, it's real rarefied air for a director to just be able to pull literally any actor he wants to. I was trying to think like what is who's an actor that hasn't worked with Nolan that I would love to see in a Nolan film. The first one that came to mind for me was Tom Cruise. I would love to see Tom Cruise in a Christopher Nolan movie. I think they'd be perfect together.
That would be wild, yeah. That would work.
Because he's done a film with Leo, and I know Leo's extremely picky with his films.
Yeah, I just worry that because Tom Cruise is so involved in the creative side of all the movies he's in. So, like, he works with Christopher McQuarrie, who does the Mission Impossibles now. He's done, like, the last 3 or 4. And you just know that Tom Cruise is also directing those movies at the same time. And I don't think Nolan would let that fly. So I don't know how well they would actually gel.
Ryan, do you have an actor or an actress that comes to mind?
I was just trying to think. I feel like Christopher Nolan, the best characters he has are really like actors who are really good at like creating characters. Like Leo is very good at creating characters. I think Al Pacino's performance in Insomnia particularly was really good. And like he's a guy who's like really high caliber character type. I would like to see someone like, I always default to Nick Cage because I just love Nick Cage, but somebody who's really good at creating characters. Tom Cruise isn't really the guy for me who creates a good character. He's like an action guy. He works well in like a Nolan style.
Yeah.
But I think the best characters in Nolan movies, like Heath Ledger, he was a great character actor. He wasn't really ever the star of a movie. So like maybe pick someone like that.
Yeah, who I was just thinking of was Jake Gyllenhaal. Has Gyllenhaal been in a Nolan movie?
I don't think so.
No, he hasn't.
Gyllenhaal would be good.
Yeah.
My pick is Charlie Day.
Oh, dude.
The correct answer. There is a correct answer to this question.
That like slid past my brain. I was like, what?
The correct answer to this question is Daniel Day-Lewis. It'll never happen. But
Well, you can put him in any director movie.
DDL in a Nolan film is like it's like not fair.
Yeah, I think that's spot on with like being able to create a great character too.
Yeah.
Well, getting into how Nolan is rated as a filmmaker, where do you think he ranks in, let's say, the top 20 directors currently working? Where is he like on that list for you? Is he top 10? Is he top 5? Is he top 3?
It's tough because I have to say he's overrated as part of the structure of this podcast. But then I'm like, are there 9 directors I think are better than him for me? And probably not.
Well, it's tough because when you're talking about directors currently working, there's not a lot of directors with the filmography that Nolan has. Like, there's maybe 5 or 6 guys who've been directing for as long and for as many like high value movies as he's made. There's a lot of up and comers like Ari Aster. I would say I like his movies more personally. Like I like his style, but I wouldn't say he's a better director because he's only made 3 movies at this point. So it's tough to really make that argument. So I would put him in my top like 5 or 7 maybe.
How about you, Jason?
Yeah, after Oppenheimer, he's probably in like my top 5. Before Oppenheimer, he was already in my top 10, but Oppenheimer really put him over the top for me. I just really like that movie for some reason.
Yeah, so I did a lot of research on like lists of top directors like all time currently working. 2 that stood out for me is IMDb had him ranked as the 25th director of all time.
Interesting.
Really?
And that's including like deceased directors, like directors from like the 50s, the 60s. Probably a lot like you haven't heard of.
That's so strange because IMDb's top 250 is littered with Nolan movies.
Yeah. And Parade, which is I think like a movie website, of their 75 best directors of all time, they had him ranked 8th.
Yeah.
And you want to hear the 7 that they had ahead of him? Do you have any guesses who they had ahead of him?
Scorsese. Definitely.
Scorsese's on there.
Tarantino
is on there.
Spielberg.
Fincher, maybe.
Fincher, no.
Kubrick.
No, not Kubrick.
No,
Kubrick was like 9, I think.
What is this list?
He was like right after him.
Coppola.
No.
Really?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Kurosawa, maybe.
No.
Wow.
What?
So he was ranked ahead of all those guys you just named. So the 7 directors that they had ahead of Christopher Nolan, Steven Spielberg, Martin Scorsese, Alfred Hitchcock, James Cameron, Spike Lee,
Cameron.
Quentin Tarantino, and Paul Thomas Anderson.
Forgot about
Oh, okay.
PTA.
Yeah.
That's pretty damn.
Those were the 7 ahead.
I get it.
I would say that like
Spike Lee though.
I would say that like that's like the ballpark of where he is as a director. Not only is he really good at making movies, but he's got this like wholly unique ability to make movies that are both really good as well as super accessible. So many of his movies just make tons of money at the box office. I mean, I'm looking at the list of like budget versus gross. Like all of his movies have made a ton of money. Even something like Prestige, which like didn't make a ton, it was a budget of $40 million. It made $110 million at the box office.
That's really good.
Even though like I think he only has 2 movies that made $1 billion. It's just Dark Knight and Dark Knight Rises, which I guess makes sense. They're superhero movies. But like at the time of us recording this podcast, Oppenheimer, which had estimated budget of $100 million. You want to take a guess how much Oppenheimer's made at the box office this summer?
Profit.
How much gross? How much gross?
750.
I was gonna say 600.
Yeah, it's made 728 at the time of this recording.
Yeah.
Monster box office numbers.
Yeah.
For a film about the guy who is in charge of the Manhattan Project.
3-hour film.
Yeah.
It's not a short movie.
Logan Paul said was trash.
Yeah.
He walked out on it.
Logan Paul walked out of it due to not having Subway Surfers going on in the sidebar to keep his attention.
We got to get him on the podcast.
Yeah, Logan Paul, if you're listening to this, friend of the show, Logan Paul. We'll get him on the show.
Not enemy of the show.
So what is it about his movies, do you think, Jason, that like makes them so accessible to wider audiences regardless of the topic that he's going into?
Well, I think one thing that you mentioned is just like the intros that he does for most of his movies. They're always a little bit disconnected and always really epic. So he draws you in right away with like a huge set piece that's exciting and cool, and then wants you to ask questions and be engaged, which is something that you talked about with Memento. So he's really good at just making things feel complex, but in a way that keeps you asking what's happening. And if you stick through his movies, most of the time that's going to pay off really big. Another thing he does is like have a nice little twist at the end of his films. So once you get there, a lot of times you'll leave the theater being like, that was the best thing I've ever seen, because the last thing that happened in the movie was like a huge twist. So
yeah, and we won't get too much into spoilers here because, like you said, a good number of his movies do have twists to them. But I think it helps make the viewer like pay attention to his stuff. It's kind of like M. Night Shyamalan, Philadelphia native M. Night Shyamalan. We'll definitely have to do a pod on him.
Friend of the podcast.
Friend of the pod. Listen, M. Night, if you're watching, I know you live around here. Come on the podcast. Having twists is not always necessarily a good thing in a movie, but it does help the viewer like pay attention more, because his movies are like kind of complicated sometimes. I mean, especially in something like Interstellar, where they're going into like black holes and like relativity and string theory, and like we just watched Jason just watched Tenet for the first time recently, and Tenet is a movie where like you leave the theater and you immediately go on YouTube to look up an explainer video of what the hell you just watched.
yeah, that's his least accessible movie, I would say.
But even Tenet made almost $400 million at the box office,
And that was like pretty much during the pandemic too.
and that movie starring John David Washington, who, you know, I think he's an up and coming actor, but there's no star power to him, at least not now.
Yep.
Yeah, probably because he was in Tenet.
Listen, he looks good in what's that movie that's coming out? Oh my god, it's a science fiction movie.
I think I know what you're talking about, but I can't think of it.
I'm blanking. Oh, we'll cut this out. I'm completely blanking.
Cut this.
Some of the actors that have been in his movies. Christian Bale's been in 4 of his films. Who do you think's been in the most?
Michael Caine.
No, okay.
Say that.
Michael Caine is in all 3 Batman movies. He's in Inception, he's in Interstellar, he's in Prestige, he's in Dunkirk, and he's in Tenet.
He's only a voice cameo, uncredited. He has one scene in a restaurant.
He has one scene where he specifically told Nolan, "I will not stand up, and I must be eating."
Sounds like Brad Pitt.
I love it. I'd like Brad Pitt in a Nolan movie too. I think that'd be good. Yeah.
Cillian Murphy has been in all the
He's been like 5 or 6.
yeah, he played Scarecrow in the Batman movies. He was in Dunkirk. He was in Inception.
Yeah.
And he was in Oppenheimer. He's the star of Oppenheimer.
Yeah.
Kenneth Branagh has been in a few of his like more recent films. Like he clearly hadn't met Kenneth Branagh, and then he was like, "I'm going to
Now
put
he
you in."
loves this guy.
Yeah, I'm going to put you in every freaking movie. Funny enough, like he doesn't have a lot of actresses that are in multiple of his movies. The only one I could find was Anne Hathaway, who's in Interstellar and Dark Knight Rises.
Right.
But he kind of goes with different female leads.
Well,
for
he
all
just
his
doesn't
films.
have a lot of female leads.
He's definitely a male-centric filmmaker.
Yeah, I guess we can talk about that. Like, what's up with this dude and women?
What do you mean by that?
Well, it's kind of a trope in his movies that like the wife is either dead or it's like a single husband.
Wasn't Marion Cotillard in Inception?
She is in Inception,
But she dies.
Dark Knight Rises.
and she's dead.
Oh yeah, that's another actress that's been in 2 of his films.
Yeah, and she's
She dies in both.
Yeah, she's the love interest in Dark Knight Rises.
She dies horribly in both.
She betrays Batman.
What's up with this dude and woman?
They are very male centric movies, which I don't know. Maybe that's why they do so well at the box office. I would love to see like the gender splits on like people that go to see Oppenheimer.
I mean, you can see it like this summer because like all the women went to Barbie.
Yeah, like I mean, if you're getting like very very surface level with it, like Barbie's the movie for women, Oppenheimer is the movie for the lads.
Yeah, but I saw both because I'm an ally.
I also saw both because I'm
He's an ally, yeah.
I like Oppenheimer more because I'm a man.
Dylan, did you see both?
Moving on.
What's up with this dude and woman?
Let's talk about the Oscars for a second. How many I already asked Jason this, so Ryan, I'm going to ask you this. Christopher Nolan, not necessarily his movies, but Christopher Nolan, how many times has he been nominated for an Oscar?
For directing or for writing or for anything?
This is writing, directing, Best Picture. How many times has he been nominated?
I feel like it's probably only like twice. That would be my guess.
Christopher Nolan has 5 Oscar nominations.
That's more than I thought.
He has Best Writing nomination for Memento, which he got with his brother, who I believe like originally wrote the story for that film. Best Original Screenplay for Inception. Best Picture nominee for Inception. And then he has only been nominated Best Director 1 time.
That was Dunkirk, I believe.
Dunkirk.
Yeah.
Dunkirk also got a Best Picture nomination.
I'm going to be singing Dunkirk's praises. I love Dunkirk.
Nice.
Christopher Nolan has a really important role to play with the Academy Awards because The Dark Knight famously snubbed for Best Picture nominee, and because of that, they expanded the Best Picture nominees to 10. Basically, I mean, it's known as like the Dark Knight rule because they want to get those more mainstream films into the Academy Awards because nobody was watching them.
Nobody's still watching them.
It didn't help.
2023 update. Still nobody watches the Academy Awards.
But we nominated 3 Marvel movies this year.
Funny enough, his films have been nominated and won awards. Like there's a whole laundry list of awards for sound mixing and sound editing and visual effects. He's got an editing win for Dunkirk, best cinematography for Inception. However, all those actors we talked about before, you would think, well, this guy, he gets really great performances out of his actors. His films must be littered with acting nominations and wins, right?
I disagree.
I would guess they're not.
How many nominations, Ryan, do the actors in his movies or actresses have?
I know Heath Ledger, and that is the only one I know.
Heath Ledger is the only one.
Yeah.
Best Supporting Actor nomination, Best Supporting Actor win posthumously for Heath Ledger.
He's 1 for 1.
Yeah, friend of the pod.
I mean, is this not crazy that this guy hasn't won more Oscars. Why is he not cleaning up every year that he comes out with a movie?
He'll do it this year. I think Killian's going to get it.
Oppenheimer's absolutely going to get a shit ton of Oscars, but I think there's a reason, at least for acting wise, why he's never gotten any nominations there. Because I just think a lot of Nolan's characters in his movies are not super interesting. I think that's going to be the main crux of my issues with him as a director, really.
And it's crazy, like looking back at it, that no nomination for McConaughey in Interstellar.
That's a little surprising.
Even though, like, he's like crazy emotional in that movie. He was so emotional, it's like a meme now of him crying.
Yeah.
No like best supporting actress for like Chastain or Anne Hathaway in that movie. No nomination for DiCaprio in Inception. And DiCaprio, he's basically like a lock to get nominated anytime he's in a movie nowadays.
Yeah, but he wasn't a lock to win until The Revenant. He didn't have a single win up until. Yeah.
It's pretty wild just like looking back at it. He's got these all-star casts of actors, and it's very possible that Oppenheimer is like the one. I'm sure we'll do a podcast on the Oscars next year, and like looking at it now, yeah, it would make sense that Cillian Murphy is going to get nominated for Best Actor. So Best Director, Best Picture. Who else? If you had to pick one,
it might get some supporting, like maybe 2 or 3, probably not 3.
Yeah, supporting.
If you had to pick one Best Supporting Actor, who's getting it from that movie?
I love Matt Damon in that movie. I would probably pick him, but
he's a good one.
I think if we're doing Vegas odds, I would say Robert Downey Jr.
Yeah, I
is
think
probably
he's the one who's going
the most likely to get it. I would love Rami Malek to get a Best Supporting Actor nomination for the one scene he was in, basically talking in the courthouse.
Has that ever happened? I know,
like Alec Baldwin and Glengarry Glen Ross.
Yeah, did he get nominated for that?
The least amount of screen time that an actor's won for.
I think so. We'll look it up. We'll throw a graphic up.
Let's get our producer on that. Producer.
Yeah, Jeff. Thanks.
The guy got behind the monitors there.
Okay, I was gonna throw up a graphic, like I said in the recording, but then I remembered that this is an audio medium. Alec Baldwin did not win an Oscar for his role in Glengarry Glen Ross. He was, in fact, not even nominated. I am so sorry for misleading you.
So with all that being said, how would we say that he's rated on, like, right now we're doing a scale of 1 to 10. Leave a comment down below if you have a better rating scale than what we're going with here. We're open. We're open to mixing it up, but
at this point we've said that in every episode, so I think we should just keep saying it every episode.
Just keep leaving comments. If you've commented on another episode, just go back and all of them leave the identical comments. We need it for engagement.
You can comment multiple times.
Exactly.
I mean, from your rankings that you saw online, you got to put Nolan near the top. Like, if a 10 is one of the best directors of all time, Nolan's got to be at least an 8 or a 9.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm thinking. Like, if Spielberg and Scorsese are your 10s and Christopher Nolan's ranked right alongside them, then he's got to be a 9.
Yeah, I would say like an 8 or a 9 is probably in the realm. So I'm going to be arguing for that he's underrated then.
So you think he should be a 10, or you have to argue that
I have to argue that he's a 10
director.
And then Jason is in charge of overrated. Ryan, just for the sake of conversation, like where would you land, like generally, like overrated or underrated?
I think he's mainly overrated, but there are certain movies that I think are underrated. So
yep,
it's hard to be completely on one side, but I would say he's overrated.
All right, so Jason, you have the duty of arguing that Christopher Nolan, the guy that we've spent this entire podcast praising for his filmmaking.
I'm like, Oppenheimer's the movie of the decade. I love him so much.
Summer.
So tell everybody at home why Christopher Nolan is overrated.
All right, I will say that some of his nonlinear storytelling is occasionally to the detriment of the film. Like, come on. You didn't need to do this for the Prestige.
Tell a regular story.
You could tell the Prestige in sequential order, and it would be just as good. You could make Tenet make more sense. You could make Tenet make more sense and not lose any of the effect. Tenet could have made sense. He didn't have to do all that.
Dunkirk didn't have to be that complicated. It's a simple war movie.
Dunkirk, it could have been one day. We could have showed us just the one day. Even like oh my God, he can't help himself. Even Inception, which is mostly told in order with a couple flashbacks, he's like, but every time you go into another layer of the dream, time changes.
Moving at 1/7 the speed.
We need to see that van falling off a bridge for 45 minutes. It's very important to the
There's
story.
a cut of the movie where they just filmed that for 45 minutes.
Like, what? I understand he likes it, but sometimes it doesn't actually enhance the storytelling. And when it doesn't enhance it, but he's still doing it, it's a little bit of a drawback. I'd also say that, I already said that The Dark Knight's not my favorite superhero movie. I do think it's an awesome movie. But I hung out with a lot of film students in college, and I knew so many guys who were like, I'm in film school because I saw The Dark Knight.
Yeah. Nolan's one of those guys where film students love sucking Nolan off.
Yeah.
I know it's not. I'm not arguing overrated, but I will give a slight hot take here that The Dark Knight is not as good as people give it credit for when you really start to break down the plot of the movie.
Oh, we better switch sides because I will argue with you right now.
The Dark Knight kind of falls apart in the third act a little bit.
Yeah, it's a little
when
long.
he's like chasing the Joker through a building with his like weird like sonar system, and then he's chasing down Two-Face.
It's a superhero movie.
Once you get past that chase scene where it's got the reveal that Commissioner Gordon's not dead. Once you get past that point in the movie, I think the quality drops a little bit. It's still a very good movie, but on rewatch, I don't know if it holds up as well.
Yeah, Two-Face is kind of tacked on to the movie and then dies immediately.
Yeah, the idea of The Dark Knight as a film, I think, may be more influential than like what it is in actuality.
Listen, if you like The Dark Knight and it's your favorite superhero movie, just read Batman: The Long Halloween. Just read it. Just read it. It's faster and better.
I'm sorry, I interrupted your overrated argument. Do you have anything
Just
else?
read Batman: The Long Halloween. It's awesome. I have a copy. I'll lend it to you. It's by Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale, who did that poster right there.
You can't see in the frame, probably.
Oh, and also, if you're only listening on audio, you also can't see it, but it's Batman looking over a ledge. Yeah.
He looks like Batman in the picture.
Yeah, so just the timeline thing, Dark Knight potentially being a little overrated. Then you've got Tenet.
It's like, oh no, what have I done?
I'm steaming on this one, boys.
Tenet, just like, you have to watch that movie 3 times for it to make sense, but it's not good enough to watch 3 times.
Not even good enough to watch once.
Yeah, I knew people who did not stick it out past 30 minutes. Memento really doesn't have that great a story outside of its gimmick, I would say. I do like Memento a lot, but it leans heavily on the messed around timelines. And yeah, Insomnia is not that special, but I'd argue it's the least Nolan movie. So
the crux of your overrated argument is individual movies, when you look at them in a vacuum, might not be as good as we think they are.
Yeah, Inception, I think, is really overrated. I think it's like an action film with a neat little gimmick, but I don't think it's like the greatest action film of all time.
Yeah, I think going off that a little bit, a lot of Nolan's films, at least early on, they were like gimmicky films. They were like, here's the plot, like, or here's the story, like, conceit. Like, we're telling the story this way, and that's the gimmick. And like, you went along with the story because the gimmick was super interesting. And he's really good at writing like stories that have like these grand, cool ideas, but he's never good at like writing the characters, and like the dialogue is usually very stilted and awkward. And like, there's a lot of Nolan things that pop up in almost all of his movies where I'm just like, I really don't like that about him.
Yeah, he's like the ultimate elevator pitch director.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a good way to put it.
Like, if you need to explain in like 2 sentences what his films are about, he sounds like the most interesting director ever with his movies.
Yeah. Inception being like, it's a dream heist movie. It's like, holy shit, that's the coolest thing I've ever heard. Yeah. But then when you see it, and then Tom Hardy's like, you mustn't be afraid to dream a little bigger, darling. And he's making fun of this guy's gun, and he's like, I pull out a slightly bigger gun.
That's like the best part in the movie.
It's so stupid.
That was my favorite part.
Dumb. No, it's like, I like it because of how stupid it is. Yeah, why didn't he pull out a dinosaur? Why didn't he just pull out a gun? Like, that shows the limitations of what Chris Nolan will deliver.
It shows the limitations on the budget he wanted for the CGI in that movie.
Yeah, he couldn't pull out a dinosaur. But, like, for him to be like, you have to dream big. Here's a bigger gun. I was like, okay.
It's like in it's like in the Ryan Reynolds Green Lantern movie, where it's like it's as strong as your imagination, and his imagination was like a minigun.
Yeah,
a green minigun.
Yeah. Oh my god. Yeah. What do you think? How are you going to argue that a 9 out of 10 director should be a 10 out of 10 director?
Well, I think the proof is right in front of me here, which is my laundry list of Oscar nominations and the lack of like true recognition that he's gotten as an all-time great director. I mean, if you list out those other directors that Parade had above him, I mean, like Spielberg, Scorsese, Hitchcock, James Cameron, Tarantino, these are guys that are cemented in their legacies as like all-time great directors. And I kind of alluded to like a sports analogy where there are a lot of great athletes who are thought down upon because they don't have the championships, they don't have the playoff success. And Nolan, without like what if he stops making movies like 3 movies from now, and you say he's got 15 feature films and he's got like 2 best director nominations and no wins? It kind of like makes him seem like he was less of a great and influential director than he really was in actuality. We recently talked about James Gunn on the podcast and how his movies are all kind of similar to each other. A lot of 5 of his 6 movies are fun little like lighthearted superhero comedy movies. Christopher Nolan's films are all over the place. This dude is like got a checklist of every single genre of movie. Mm-hmm. And he's just rattling them off one by one by one. He's proved that he's got the range. And for some reason, he's just not gotten the recognition for it that I would argue that he deserves at this point.
Well, if you're talking just in terms of like the Academy recognition, Nolan makes a lot of like genre-y type films. He makes a lot of large action movies. He makes like Insomnia and Memento are like kind of noir style detective movies. There's 3 superhero movies in there. These are the types of movies the Academy never really recognizes. I mean, at least in the past. So if you're judging him just by Academy success, then yeah, maybe he's a little underrated. But if you're looking at like the scope of the population of people and movie lovers in the world, Nolan is like, everybody talks about Nolan all the time. He is the most successful commercial filmmaker working today. Maybe with Tarantino, they're both pretty close, I think. Yeah. But I mean, and Tarantino's another guy who never gets Academy success. He's never won a Best Director either, I'm pretty sure. So
don't fact check that.
No, I'm pretty sure. I'm like 70% sure. but
in order to be regarded in that like upper echelon of directors, which is where we kind of like settled on him with, don't you kind of have to do both?
Yeah,
like prove that you have the box office success, that you have the critical success, and then you have and the Academy Awards are the highest platform of film recognition. When you look back and you say like, oh, that actor has 3 Oscar wins, like that means like that guy's an incredible actor. That's how they're judged by. I mean, Leonardo DiCaprio, for the longest time, people were like, well, this guy can't get over the hump. Yeah. He's a great actor, but why is he not winning Oscars?
Yeah, I think you're right. Like we can consider that a little more in how he is rated. So I guess he's maybe considered an 8 out of 10 right now. I'd still say he's a little overrated.
Oppenheimer.
Oh, that's true. He's really underrated.
No.
The
Oppenheimer is going to win every Oscar.
The counter argument to what I'm saying.
Finally, a biopic Oscar movie they're going to love.
Yeah, the counter argument to my argument is that he's about to get like the mega Oscar success that he's never had for any of his other movies.
Exactly.
I'm going to look like this argument that I'm making right now is going to age poorly if Oppenheimer wins.
Yeah, we should have had this debate in like 6 months.
Yeah, if Oppenheimer wins 8 Oscars, next year, then yeah, that's it. That's like his crowning achievement. It will be interesting to look back on it, like if Oppenheimer becomes like this like giant Oscar success, it'll be looked at as his best movie.
I don't know if that's true, because Scorsese got no recognition from the Academy until The Departed.
Departed, yeah,
And
The
no one
Departed
thinks,
is definitely not.
no one
his
thinks
best
The
movie.
Departed's his best movie. Goodfellas, Wolf of Wall Street, even maybe, and like some of his more early work like that. That everyone who knows Scorsese knows those are his best movies.
What do you think, Jason, is going to be regarded as Nolan's like legacy film? What is the Christopher Nolan film?
The Dark Knight.
Inception. Those two, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say for better or worse, he's going to be known as the Dark Knight guy, even though I think he's so much more than just a guy that made a really, really good superhero film.
Yeah, I don't think people are going to minimize him to just The Dark Knight. I think he's past that point.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Like he's reached the echelon where he is Nolan and The Dark Knight is part of that, but no one's like, oh, that's the Dark Knight guy. They're like, oh, that's the Nolan.
I mean, I think the stretch that he's on right now after Dark Knight Rises, which I think we can all agree here, The Dark Knight Rises is the worst of the 3 Batman movies that he made.
Yeah, I still think it's pretty good though.
I think it's a solid movie, but it's not The Dark Knight.
I would argue between that and The Batman Begins. They're pretty close.
But the stretch that he's on right now, Interstellar, Dunkirk, Tenet, I know Jason's like Tenet, and Oppenheimer, and then I'm sure, I mean, this guy, another thing about him is that he basically makes a movie every like 3 years.
Yeah, his output's really
He's
good.
super consistent.
Awesome.
Yeah.
He's not, Tarantino that takes like huge breaks between movies or anything like he's like, I'm ready to make another movie right now.
Tarantino's been fairly prolific. I mean, he's made like 3 in the last 10 years, I think.
Nolan's also given no indications that he plans on like stopping anytime soon. He's 53. He's not that old. He could be making movies for another 20 years.
He looks great for 53.
Yeah.
My dad's 55 and he looks 20 years older than Nolan.
I mean, if he's making movies at a clip of every 3 years, in 20 years he's going to have double the amount of movies he has right now.
Wow.
I think that it wouldn't be a hot take to say that if he keeps the same pace, he could be considered like on the Mount Rushmore of directors. If he keeps the same pace and he keeps the quality that he's outputting right now.
I don't think he'll ever get to that point. I think his quality is not high enough to be the Mount Rushmore.
What's the highest you've ever rated one of his films? You gave Dark Knight a 5?
Dark Knight's 5, yeah.
Okay.
Out of 5 out of 5. And I give very few 5s, so that's up there. The Prestige is 4 for me. And Oppenheimer's 4, and then everything else is below that. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I think maybe the only thing holding him back is his films are very like box office catered to an extent.
Yeah.
They're large and they're bombastic, and I think that's why he'll never have to worry about like getting his films funded ever. It's amazing the filmmakers and the actors that have difficulty getting movies made nowadays, and I don't think he'll ever have trouble with that, especially with like the caliber of actors that he's just able to pull in for anything.
Yeah.
I mean, he's got Michael Caine on speed dial.
Michael Caine's in a nursing home right now.
Yeah. Michael Caine's like, listen, if I can do it from my bed without moving, I will be in your next movie.
How old is Michael Caine? He's got to be in his 80s.
Yeah, he's an old guy. Though Michael Caine famously, he did Jaws 4. Was it Jaws 4? 3?
Oh, yeah.
Jaws 4, The Revenge. He did it just because he wanted to buy a summer home.
Good for him.
Now he's sleeping in that summer home.
Yeah, shout out to Michael Caine. So I would say that I would still stick to that he's underrated. I think that's like my actual opinion.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Where would you guys land like ultimately?
I can't get on board with that. There's too many flaws in too many of his movies. I mean, like a lot of the way he makes me, like the hallmarks of Nolan, like the thing, like, because you can point to directors and be like, this is something this director always does. Like Wes Anderson, Tarantino, Scorsese, they all have certain things in their movies. Nolan, the things he puts in his movies annoy me every time. Like, I'm never annoyed when Tarantino has a bloody gore fest scene, or when Wes Anderson puts together some quirky as shit like tapestry of whatever. I'm like, yeah, do your thing, director. But Nolan, I'm always just like, oh my god, he's doing the time shit again. Like, can you like? That's why I like Oppenheimer, because he branched out a little bit. He made something that was more mature. He made something that was more like about characters and not about his story that he wanted to tell. Which I'm hoping he does more stuff like that now. If he, like you said, if he starts doing more like movies in the vein of Oppenheimer, he could be on the director like Mount Rushmore.
What's like a genre of film that you would like to see Christopher Nolan do in the future that he hasn't done?
I think what could put him up there is just if he made a gangster movie like all the other big name directors eventually do or love doing. Like, he'd be so good at doing a Goodfellas type of film.
This might be a little outside the box, but I'd love to see him do like a time spanning romance movie.
Oh, that would be good too. I'd like to
get two actors with really good chemistry. Get like Ryan Gosling and somebody else.
Ryan Gosling has chemistry with everyone.
And then like have Nolan take a shot at like a romantic like drama.
Well, if that's outside the box, my answer is like really outside the box. I would love to see him do like a slasher movie.
Oh, interesting.
Like a full on like serial killer movie or something like that.
Scream or like Halloween style or
yeah, because like looking at his films, he doesn't really have like horror anywhere in this. I would love to see him like branch out into that. I'm sure he could do it.
There's definitely some horror. Like you could go into horror aspects in a lot of his movies, and like Memento, I think has a little bit of a horror aspect to it.
Yeah, or I think of like the Batman films. Anytime like there's like scarecrow stuff happening.
Yeah.
So I think he's got it in him.
Yeah, I could see that. Because Memento, the best thing about Memento for me was like the psychological horror of a guy who like knows he's a fuck up, or like he knows he's an awful person, but he's just choosing not to. What was it at the end where he knew he killed his wife or something? Spoilers. And and like he chose to forget about it. He chose not to like to ignore it and to like keep reliving this cycle of investigating it.
Yeah, he always wants someone to hunt down even if they're innocent.
Like there's some psychological horror there that really wasn't super explored, but it would be cool if he made something more in depth like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we can all agree here that Christopher Nolan is he's an excellent director, and he's one of very few directors that anything that he makes I need to see in theaters. I'm not a huge movie theater guy in general. I'm perfectly okay with watching things on like my 4K TV at home if it means like I don't have to hear like kids like having like an argument or like playing on their phones next to me. Every Nolan film that comes out in the future, I need to see in movie theaters. I think he's that like mandatory.
Yeah, I told myself after Tenet came out, I'm never getting excited for another Nolan movie. And then Oppenheimer came, and I was like, shit, I'm excited. So,
just when I think I'm out.
I guess you're right.
All right, well, that's going to be it for this one, guys. Let us know in the comments. Did we get it right with Christopher Nolan? What are some topics you'd like to see for future episodes from us? Make sure to leave a like on this episode and consider supporting the show by checking out our Patreon page. For myself, Jason, and Ryan, we will catch you guys in the next Over Under podcast. See you at the movies.